What's good, tinfoilers? The second episode of season 2 is called Order, and this time we're turning our attention away from Juliette and back to what's going on immediately after everyone watched her waltz right over that hill. So you can think of episode 2 as kind of a meanwhile back at the ranch episode. In this episode, we're going to see Bernard's reaction to the major new development and the threat that it poses to his power. In response, he employs a series of calculated and outright diabolical tactics as damage control. But before we get into the details, a quick word of warning. This is a video full of spoilers, so be sure you're okay with that if you're not already caught up with the show. Much love to the channel patrons, aka the executive producers. Thank you so much for what you do. Just a quick reminder that this is a book agnostic series, so no book spoilers in the comments, please. Alright, yada yada, enough of the intro. Strap in, folks, because it's time to dive. Order starts things off looking directly into Bernard's eyes as we watch the reflection of a video feed that appears to be coming from Juliette's body cam as she's approaching the entrance to the new silo. So he's seeing what she sees. Now Bernard's got this mortified look on his face as he takes the whole view in. You definitely get the sense that he's never seen this before and he's horrified by it. Then we get a full shot of the room and it turns out we're in Bernard's super secret man cave. There doesn't appear to be anything else in the space but this terminal, which appears to be operable by voice command. You would think he'd at least have a couch and a beer fridge back here. The big takeaway here, though, is that Bernard's reaction tells us that he doesn't know as much about the outside world as we may have thought. So right as Jules drops into the access ramp, Bernard stops the video and nervously flips through a copy of the order until he comes to a page under the heading, "In the event of a failed cleaning, prepare for war." The notion that a failed cleaning serves as a pretext for adopting a war stance suggests that the founders anticipated the concept of a survivable world outside the silo to be so dangerously subversive that it could set off a chain of events ultimately leading to the collapse of the silo itself. Now, right as Bernard is reading this, he's interrupted by the sound of a blaring siren and flashing red lights. Someone has set off an alarm. Now, as he runs to see what happened, Bernard passes through several rooms with heavy doors, including what looks like a server room and that familiar big door that confirms that we were just in the room that the special 18 key is for. Now, Judge Meadows is in the next scene after she's just been startled awake by the alarm. If you remember her story from season 1, she's been playing the role of head of judicial, but she's fully in the pocket of Bernard. She's nothing more than a figurehead or a puppet to the real power, and she seems miserable for it. So she's been having a non-stop party to numb herself from the pain. Anyway, she gets the real news about Juliette and the failed cleaning, and then she gets this glint in her eye like she's enjoying the fact that Bernard's got himself in a bit of trouble. She clearly doesn't like this man, and on some level she's enjoying this. This event sparks something in her because it compels her to dump a fresh screwdriver down the drain. We may be seeing the beginning of a turn for this character if this scene is any hint. So we learn that Sims pulled the alarm after everyone witnessed Juliette cross over the hill as a way to tamp down on any immediate panic. Bernard adds to that an 8 p.m. curfew and he places the sheriff's department under judicial's command. Temporarily, of course. But Bernard is not done yet. He wants spies to follow around Pop Nichols, and he wants 2 people from the lowers brought in for questioning. Notice how all of that division of power stuff that the silo claims assures a balance of power doesn't really exist the moment something threatens that power. Very interesting. So the people down in the lowers are expressing their anger and demanding answers. Hank and a few other deputies are trying to keep everyone calm, but after what they saw in that video, they won't be calmed down easily. Knox joins in and he's pushing a similar message. Basically, he's saying, we want answers, but we should listen to the leadership because they know better than us. Now, Shirley Worley, on the other hand, says that they will only get answers by force because the powers that be have no incentive to do so willingly. She also blows up Knox by confronting him on the fact that he's the one that turned Juliette in the first place. But his response to that is that he's arguing for the greater good. If he had not done so, the raiders would have hurt more people and they would have gotten Juliette in the end anyway. All of this, and it's just the opening scene. So after the intro, we get this scene with Pop Nichols, and he's staring out over the hill, no doubt wondering what happened to Juliette. wondering if she's okay. Then he's called in by a nurse to check on a newborn. The infant is a stand-in for Juliette, and we can read this scene as Pop's holding Juliette like his little baby. But we also get confirmation that judicial goons are watching his movements. Now, Sims and Billings have a conversation about judicial's temporary takeover and Billings' transition to sheriff. This is more of judicial trying to keep things under control. Billings reminds Sims that there is no going back to normal after what they all saw outside. He also notes that what judicial is doing goes against the jam-packed. Sims gives a fake testimony for the police report regarding the grounds for Juliette's cleaning before the scene ends. Down in the lowers, Hank pays a visit to Walker's workshop. He has to bring her in for questioning. They have this awkward conversation about how he has to make it look good, so she's got to wear the cuffs and do the full perp walk. What this tells us is that the decision to bring her in was just for show, optics. The real motive behind doing this is to make it clear to onlookers that this is what happens when you defy the silo. So she's being made into an example. In the next scene, Knox heads down to a part of the lowers we haven't seen yet. It looks like a fabrication department of some kind. Anyway, he meets up with an old friend that has some sway and he makes 2 requests. But we only find out what one of those requests is, and that's to refrain from making any weapons if asked. So Knox is basically trying to prevent a violent riot. Now, as for that second request, I think it's related to those contraptions from the trailer that peppered the silo with pieces of paper with the words Juliette lives on it. If I had to guess, that's what he's gonna ask him to make. The funniest moment of the episode is when Judge Meadows reacts to seeing Bernard at her door. Contempt confirmed. Bernard shows up in person, out of respect, as he put it, to ask for her help in running his current spin campaign. He needs her there to further legitimize things and hide the truth behind the window cleaning and the tape. Now, he does have a hard time convincing her, even resorting to bribes to get her to play along. But in the end, she says all she wants is one thing. She references the wizard in the Wizard of Oz novel and talks about escaping. Now, this was a good scene because it fills us in on some of the past between these 2 characters. Actually, there's a lot we find out, but the key things to remember are that Meadows was at one point Bernard's shadow, so she was being groomed to take Bernard's seat, but something happened that changed that. It might be related to why she turned to drinking for 25 years as a cope. We only know that this 25-year-old event is something she kept to herself. Not even Bernard knows what it is, so this is super secret, like the man cave. We also learn that Bernard sees her as the person that knows him best. In other words, he trusts her more than anyone, including Mr. Sims. So Shirley and company are in some dark corner of the silo devising a plan to get to the bottom of things. They want to know what happened to Juliette, but they also want to prove to everyone that they're being lied to by the silo leadership. Shirley believes that if she can prove that the suit situation was fugazi from the start, then the people will be mad enough to take action, especially after they all saw Juliette survive on the outside. Walker and McLean are both in prison, and they're going back and forth about their strategy, but it ends up not mattering when they're suddenly released from jail without any fuss later on. But the point of this scene, as I see it, was to show how they were both willing to sacrifice anything to resist the silo. So it's time for Bernard to give his address that will finally quiet down all of the rumors. Bernard has to come up with something that will distract the audience from the truth, but it also has to be clever enough to get them to not riot for a few days. What he chooses is to reframe the entire event as something positive. He recasts Juliette as a hero by claiming the reason she made it further than anyone else is because she was wearing the awesome new and improved tape that the silo just invented. He also tells them that Juliette did not survive. He's sure that she still met the fate of all the other cleaners, it just took longer. So his audience is supposed to believe that her body is conveniently resting on the other side of that hill. But remember, this is all progress, right? We're closer to our goal of getting out of here. Someday. Notice how Bernard cleverly moves the goalposts here as a way of pacifying the audience. We learn later on that he even planted hecklers in the crowd to make it all look legit. Bernard is diabolical. Judge Meadows co-signs Bernard's speech, and things seem to play well with the audience overall. There is some trouble when Shirley speaks out. She's trying to counter the lies, but a raider shows up to put that to bed. Shirley nearly escapes a judicial punishment, if not for Knox and Hank stepping up on her behalf. I don't think there's any stopping Shirley though. She seems adamant about getting to the truth no matter what. She's kinda picked up where Juliette left off. Sims and Bernard meet up again in the relic room for a quick scene. And in it, Sims basically tells Bernard that the plan worked. Disaster averted. Everything is in order. But Bernard knows all he did was buy himself some time. The key takeaway from this scene is that Sims brings up the shadow thing again. Basically, he's saying, hey, if you let me be your shadow, we could shoulder the load together. He's like, nah, I'm cool. This is a massive brush off, and Sims takes it as a sign that he may not be as close to getting that position as he thought. This comes out later in a scene with Camille, his wife and former judicial employee. During their conversation, you still get the vibe that they're planning something, and it feels like it's more than just a power grab. Conversation also reveals that Meadows worked in IT under Bernard before she transferred to judicial. Meadows and Bernard apparently go way back. This makes Sims nervous, because he suspects that Bernard is looking at Meadows as his next shadow, rather than old Bobby Bygones. After all of the people this man threw over the ledge for Bernard, What a shame. Later, we catch a moment where Bernard is descending the silo's main staircase. We see a tag initialed JL for Juliette lives. Bernard reads this sign as trouble, and he probably should because it's an indication that an uprising is coming. Next, we go back down to the lowers, and we get this scene that is meant to define who the rebels are in this situation. Shirley has taken the lead, along with a handful of other members of Mechanical, who are bent on exposing the lies. But now Cooper shows up because he was caught spying on behalf of Knox, but he lets them know that he's down with them. Then Walker shows up too after following Cooper, but it seems as though she's there to throw a wet blanket on the entire situation. Walker seems to think that Juliette didn't make it, and I think between the pain of knowing that and the uproar that her absence has caused, Walker feels like none of this was worth it, so she's given up on fighting what she sees as a losing battle. She's here to stop them from repeating the same mistake, yet she also recognizes the significance of their mission, the very same goal Juliette pursued. The search for truth. In this sense, Juliette continues to live on in her thoughts. Now, Bernard pays Meadows another visit. This is after the speech, and he's doing so to thank her for having his back by showing up. Now, Meadows thinks that he made a smooth recovery despite it all, and overall, she's impressed by the way he handled a potential disaster. But he reminds her that if the plan had not worked, he would have resorted to brute force. He knows that this will only work to a point, so he needs more distractions for the people to keep them off the scent and keep things under wraps. That's why he wants Meadows back on the team. Apparently, Meadows has the chops to be a good decision maker, and she's the only person Bernard thinks can fit the bill. Now, Bernard apologizes for trying to bribe her, and you can tell it meant something to her. And this could be a sign that maybe respect was something she felt she wasn't getting enough of as a cosplay judge in Bernard's circus. It might explain what she says at the very end of this episode. The scene ends with Meadows making a proposition that leaves Bernard speechless. She'll help him if, when it's all said and done, she gets a biosuit with some of that good tape because she wants to leave the silo. Yeah. What now, Bernard? Now, this was a decent episode. I think the Meadows and Bernard parts really stood out, as well as Walker and her workshop scene, but the upcoming conflict between Sims and Meadows looks like it's going to be very interesting. 3.5 stars. Now it's your turn. I got a few questions. So what's up with Meadows wanting to go outside? Is this like a death wish with a side of symbolism, or does she have a plan? My guess is that it's related to the thing that happened 25 years ago. What are Bobby and Camille really up to? Does he just want power, or is there some other agenda at hand? And also, now that we've seen Bernard's super secret man cave, and we know that Bernard has never seen any of what happened beyond the hill, do we still think that Bernard is in contact with other silos, or anyone on the outside? Does this silo actually operate alone? Anyway, that's a wrap for this one. Thank you for joining Tinfoilers. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you already know what to do. Thanks again to the patrons and the entire Tinfoil squad. Be safe out there, and remember to be kind to yourself. And until next weekend, off you go.